I am presenting Union Gospel Press's Sunday School Lesson number 13, Sunday, November 30th, 2025. The lesson is entitled, Who is Like God? Lesson text comes from Isaiah 40, chapters 12 through 17. Related scriptures are Psalms 33, 8 through 17, Isaiah 41, 21 through 29, Jeremiah 10, 1 through 25, Daniel 4, 28 through 37, Revelation 15, 2 through 4. The place is Jerusalem. The time is about 695 to 700 BC. This week, we will conclude the quarter with a focus on God's greatness and sovereignty. Today's aim, facts, to explore what the Bible says about the greatness of God. Principle, to understand that nothing and no one can compare to God. Application, to submit to our sovereign Savior. Illustrating the lesson, we submit to the sovereign ruler of the cosmos. Practical points. 1. In the face of challenges, we should remember that God holds the world in his hand. Isaiah 40:12. 2. We can never try to manipulate God. Instead, we should rest in the comfort that what God has planned will come to pass. Verse 13. 3. God is the source of wisdom. We should seek his guidance in all that we do. Verse 14. 4. When we are burdened by politics, we can rest assured that God is greater than the nations. Verse 15. 5. God is far greater than anything the world can offer. Verse 16. 6. No obstacle can ever stand in God's way. He counts even the nations as nothing. Verse 17. Golden text. All nations before him are as nothing, and they are counted to him less than nothing and vanity. Isaiah 40:17. Today we have two lesson outlines. The first is questions without answers, Isaiah 40:12 through 14. The second is statements without responses, Isaiah 40:15 through 17. Introduction. Many Christians are familiar with Isaiah 40. After 39 chapters of impending judgment and destructions, with only brief reprise of hope, the prophet delivered a new message for those who would be exiled in Babylon. One day the exile would end and give way to freedom. Most popular are the opening verses which anticipate John the Baptist, Isaiah 40:1 through 3, Matthew 3:3, and the concluding assurance of renewed strength, Isaiah 40:29 through 31. Between these passages lies a series of poetic remarks on God's character. Verses 12 through 17 form a coherent unit, which further divides in two. The opening verses, verses 12 through 14, contain three sets of rhetorical questions, and the latter portion contains three sets of statements. The opening questions attend to cosmic dimensions, surveying the known world and God's counsel. The subsequent verses, verses 15 through 17, shift from cosmology to politics, but the theological force remains. God is unmatched in power and wisdom. Nothing compares with him. Questions without answers, Isaiah 40:12. Who have measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, and meted out heaven with the span, and comprehended the dust of the earth in a measure, and weighed the mountains in scales, and the hills in a balance? Verse 13, who have divided the Spirit of the Lord, or being his counselor, have taught him? Verse 14, with whom took he counsel, and who instructed him, and taught him in the path of judgment, and taught him knowledge, and showed to him the way of understanding. The passage's opening questions assume a cosmic focus, attending to God's universal dominion, will, and knowledge. Verses 12 through 14 invoke images of the creation in Genesis 1. The prophet's questions were rhetorical. He did not need to provide an answer. To Isaiah and his audience, the response to each was clear. Only the God of Israel enjoys dominion. No one can access his will or knowledge. The first set, Isaiah 40:12. The first set of questions explored the expanse of the created order. Using parallel questions, Isaiah asked, who have measured the great dimensions of the cosmos? By offering contrasting elements of the creation, the prophet effectively considered the universe's totality. His questions range from the water to the sky and from the earth's dust to the mountains. All creation is under God's dominion. Underlying verse 12's cosmic survey is a theology of the creation. Recalling the order of Genesis 1, Isaiah progressed from the waters, Genesis 1, 2 through 6, to the sky, verses 7 through 8, to the earth, verse 9. And as we saw in lesson 1, the Old Testament offers a story of the creation distinct from the creation myths of the ancient Near East. The force of this contrast was most impactful in times of oppression and conquest and captivity. Many believe that military conquest reflected the superiority of the victor's gods over the gods of the defeated. The Jews exiting 70 years of exile bore the burden of that ancient theology. Many undoubtedly wrestled with the notion that Babylon's Marduk was greater than Israel's Yahweh. Isaiah, however, left no room for that. In his message of hope, the prophet dismantled a familiar Babylonian prayer to emphasize Yahweh's sole dominion. Those seasoned by exile were familiar with the myths that shaped Babylon's religious life. Thus, Isaiah's allusion to its text would have struck a chord with the ancient audience. Each year, the Babylonians recited their New Year festival prayer to Marduk and other gods. In it, they asked, who measures the water of the sea? To this, they answered Marduk. The question also reflected the Babylonian creation myth, Enuma Elish. In it, Marduk proclaimed that he measured the shape of Apsu, the freshwater deity. In similar words, Isaiah asked who measured the waters in his hand. Although this echo may appear at first to equate Yahweh with Marduk, the text does just the opposite. To each question in the passage, that implied answer is no one. Only Yahweh exercises dominion and counsel. Isaiah's Babylonian-style question then delivered a theological punch to Israel's enemy. Marduk is nothing. No one is comparable to God, including the assemblies of God's revered by surrounding people groups. Containing his theology, assault of Judah's captors, the prophet asked who had meted or measured the sky. Once again, those familiar with Babylonian religious life understood. Here, meted is more than the assessment of an item's dimensions. It denotes directing, determining, and ordering. The Babylonian Empire was fascinated by the night sky for that reason. Their astrologers sought to uncover the fate of individuals and empires. They believed the sky revealed destinies. Interacting with that religious background, Isaiah articulated a different view. Humanity is not subject to the sky's destiny. The sky is subject to God. Yahweh alone knows and directs the future. Beyond its refutation of Babylonian theology, verse 12 introduced a second dimension of creation theology. God is the architect of the universe. Using measuring instruments and techniques, In each question, Isaiah described God's trivial means of evaluation. The great expanse of the world is minute to him. The waters lift in the cup of his hand. The span from his thumb to pinky fingers contains the sky. He measures the mountains and hills on scales. God's role as architect is also evident in two other Old Testament creation accounts. In the divine speeches of Job 38 through 41, God described how he created all things. He laid the earth's foundation, 38:4, fixed its dimensions and measured it, verse 5, closed the sea beyond doors, verse 8, and set its limit, verse 11. His acts were not spontaneous or miscalculated. As an architect meticulously designed structures on the blueprint, God created the cosmos with precision. Likewise, Isaiah 40:12 set rhetorical questions echoes Proverbs 8:22 through 31. There, wisdom personified describes her experience of creation. She was a spectator to God's craftsmanship, watching him construct the cosmos. She watched God set up the sky as columns. Proverbs 8:27 through 28a. Confine the waters, verse 28b through 29a, and create the foundations of the earth, verse 29b. Her presence at creation, however, was not arbitrary or irrelevant. By nothing, wisdom's placed at the beginning. The text emphasizes the wisdom and purpose that motivated God's creative act. This resonates with both the wisdom orientation of Isaiah 40 through 55 and the questions that followed. The second set, Isaiah 40:13. With wisdom's view of creation in mind, the prophet presented the next series of questions. These concern God's will. Unlike the previous verse 13 offers only two questions, succinctly driving the poem forward. They focus on God's spirit and his counsel, respectively. Verse 13 asked, who has directed God's spirit? Here, Isaiah's point is clear. No one is above God's spirit. But the word is more nuanced than a cursory reading suggests. This is the same verb used in verse 12, which asks, who meted out the sky? As discussed earlier, Babylonian religion was fond of astrology, understanding the night sky to disclose destinies. Yet, as Isaiah retorted, God directs the movements of the sky. He alone understands our fate. In verse 13, Isaiah completed his refutation of Babylonian astrology, while the supposed source of fates follows God's directions. No one directs God's spirit. He is unmatched, free from outside manipulation. His spirit is self-directing. No one directs, determines, or measures it. Verse 13, second question, emphasized that point. No one can counsel God. The religious milieu of Isaiah's day imagined a council of divine beings with the Lord deities advising the chief God. This is not so with Yahweh. He is the sole God of the cosmos, and no one directs him in counsel. As Psalms 82 pointedly points it, the so-called gods of the nations are mortals destined to die, verse 7. Like Murdoch, they are nothing. The third set, Isaiah 40:14. The final set of questions picked up where verse 13 left off. Emphasizing his previous point, the prophet asks from whom God seeks counsel. The answer, of course, is no one. No one advises him, verse 13, and he seeks no one's advice, verse 14. The supposed counselors of deities have neither knowledge nor understanding. They stumble in the darkness, Psalms 82:5. Isaiah continued this stream of thought in the subsequent questions. surfacing the providential themes submerged in the text. In parallel fashion, the prophet questioned who can give God understanding or teach him justice, knowledge, or wisdom. With the force of the previous verses mounting, the answer nearly explodes off the page. No one. The God who meticulously measured the expanse of the cosmos and created all things with wisdom behind him needs no teaching. No one knows the cosmos like its creator. No one directs or informs the mind of God. Statements without responses, verse 15. Behold, the nations are as a drop of a bucket and are counted as the small dust of the balance. Behold, he taketh up the isles as a very little thing, verse 16. And Lebanon is not sufficient to burn, nor the beasts thereof sufficient for a burnt offering. Verse 17. All nations before him are as nothing, and they are counted to him less than nothing and vanity. Despite the stylistic shift in the move in the next three verses, the prophet drove his theological principle forward. Here, Isaiah turned from the grandeur of the cosmos and God's counsel to the political landscape. He began and ended with general statements and narrowed in one particular location in between. Isaiah's discussion of Lebanon should serve as a model that we can apply to any nation. The first set, Isaiah 40:15. Continuing with the measurement imagery introduced in verse 12, Isaiah assessed the gravity of the nations. Undoubtedly, a people retreated from years of Babylonian exile felt they had a sufficient grasp of the weight of the nations. Assyria, Babylon, and now Persia were massive tyrants. Their weight was crushing. Yet, seemingly immense things are minute to God. If the waters fit in his hand and the mountains rest on his balance, how much smaller must the nations be to him? He reckons them a drop of water in a bucket and a dust of scale. All the nations from small city states to domineering empires are like specks of dust or a drop of water to God. Similarly, Isaiah looked forward to the isles. These distant bodies of land were the poetic counterpart to the nations. The political coalitions that roamed the land were dust to God. Likewise, the outermost regions of the continent, residing along the edge of the known world, were fine dust to God. No nation, near or far, bears weight before God. When we consider Israel's history, verse 15's significance quickly grows apparent. As the Old Testament recounted, God's people experienced several waves of imposing might. Already, Israel had suffered enslavement in Egypt, periods of Canaanite submission, Assyrian deportation, and Babylonian exile. Before the returning Jews stood a coming span of imperial dominance. Babylon gave way to Persia. Persia gave way to Greece. Greece gave way to Rome. Certainly, the weight of the nations felt heavy, yet they are frivolous to God. They have no sway or power over him. Instead, they yield to him. The second set, Isaiah 40:13. After establishing the state of the nations before God, the prophet turned to one region in particular, Lebanon. Lebanon was Israel's northern neighbor, residing along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. Lebanon did not host a kingdom that warred against Israel. Instead, it was passed between kingdoms and empires. It was even briefly under Israelite control during Solomon's reign, 1 Kings 9:19. Due to frivolous weather and architectural conditions, the coastal mountain region was replete with wildlife, copper, iron, and wine. Its forests yielded pine, fire, cypress, and cedar trees. That wealth of timber drew throughout the ancient Near East to the region. Even the conquering empire Assyria demanded timber from it. The sudden shift from a larger focus to a smaller one is neither accidental nor insufficient. The prophet used the famed northern region to construct a powerful argument. Even great Lebanon was insufficient, how much less so were the other regions? Lebanon's wealth and abundance only emphasized God's greatness. The Old Testament largely discussed Lebanon favorably, as its proliferation of timber and wildlife proved valuable to Israel and Judah. Yet, even its abundance of wood and wildlife fell short. The surplus of its forests could not supply enough wood for sacrificial fires. That was true of its animals as well. An important detail intensifies the line. Isaiah did not write that Lebanon's clean and ceremonial animals were not enough. He proclaimed that all beasts, appropriate or inappropriate for Levitical sacrifice, were not enough. That latter category, which far outnumbers the former, would not satisfy God. Lebanon simply was not big enough. Although the prophet's driving point in verse 16 was the northern region's lack before the infinite God, his example recalls a peripheral point. In Psalms 50, God declared that every animal of the forest and the wildlife of 1,000 mountains are his, verse 10. No animal sacrifice, even if it drained Lebanon of its wildlife, is sufficient. Instead, we are to offer a sacrifice of thanksgiving, verse 14, praising the architect of the cosmos for all he has done. The third set, Isaiah 40:17. Concluding the section, Isaiah returned to his dismissal of the nations. Whereas verse 15 regarded them as nearly nothing, more droplets and dust, verse 17 states that they are less than nothing. Unlike the creation narrative that Isaiah echoed in the previous lines, verse 17 described nations that had descended from ordered creation to chaos. Their destruction descended from resembling nothing to resembling less than nothing. The nation's final descriptor, vanity, also means chaotic formlessness and fits firmly in the creation theology Isaiah composed throughout. The idea of formlessness first appears in the second verse of the Bible, where it describes the preordered states of the cosmos. Before God spoke, the universe was chaotic and formless, and the nations appeared chaotic and formless in comparison to the architect who orders all things. The universe and all that inhabit it paled in comparison to the creator of the cosmos. Questions. 1. How does Isaiah imitate Genesis 1? 2. Why did Isaiah use language from a familiar Babylonian prayer? 3. How did the prophet express a view of the night sky different from Babylon's? 4. According to Proverbs 8, who watched God create the cosmos? 5. What does the word choice in Isaiah 40:13 suggest about God's spirit? 6. How is Isaiah's mention of Lebanon applicable today? 7. How does Israel's history magnify God's might over the nation? 8. Which resources of Lebanon fell short before God? 9. What sacrifices does God ask of us? 10. What does the word vanity recall in verse 17? This concludes the Sunday School lesson for Sunday, November 30th, 2025. Thank you for listening. Please remember to click the subscribe tab. God bless.